Just a minute more, guys. He's setting it up. Okay. Alright guys, please settle down. So let's start today's session. So we'll be discussing the interim budget. Okay. So the first question that comes to our mind, let's say, what's the importance of, no, not interim budget, but for your preparation itself. What's the importance of budget for your preparation, for your UPSC? And how do you go about studying the budget? That is very important. Generally, what do? We might never have gone through the entire budget document. It's quite bulky. Part A, Part B, it's quite bulky. In the same manner, economic survey is also very bulky. So what do? We just go with the summary. Now, just going with the summary, will it help? To some extent. But is that the right way to go about budget? No, right? No. So, how to go through budget is the same way how you go through your previous year questions. Presently, students make mistakes, they go through the previous year questions, they see what questions is, what is the answer, and then they move ahead, right? But what you have to do is, you have to analyze it. So let's come back to the concept of budget. In budget, there are certain things in which the government is focusing on, right? Let's say, budget speech is a part of the budget document, the entire budget document. So in that budget speech, the finance minister emphasizes on certain things. So those things become important. That's one thing. Secondly, your static questions that are also asked, they may be linked to current affairs. Now budget is a part of the current affairs. Every year it is a new thing, right? So whatever is mentioned, so if any scheme is mentioned in the budget, any focus area is mentioned in the budget, these things become very important, right? Now, it is not to say that only these schemes will come, only these focus areas will come. No, that is not the case. Because, for example, if you take when COVID hit, right, the exams were postponed. We may think there would be questions on COVID. There was not a single question in 2020 on COVID, correct? But as per the trend, generally it happens, whatever schemes, whatever focus area, whatever emphasis is there in the budget, you would get questions related to that. Questions not just related to prelims, questions not just related to your GS3 mains, but at times you may also get an essay based on it, right? I'll give you a pro tip here, for example. In budget, later on we'll talk about Gyan. Now Gyan is for, we'll look at it, Gyan is for Garibi, Yuva, Annadata and Nari Shakti. Very much possible that you may get an essay, for example, on youth. Why I chose youth? Because anyhow, as far as Garibi is concerned, as far as Nari Shakti is concerned, you are anyhow consistently getting those topics. You can get topic on youth, that is Yuva. But all the 4 focus areas are very important. So that is how your papers setters also decide. You know, they also want some source to give you certain things. Now there was 2 years back, there was an essay which was directly asked from a topic in a government document. It does not mean that you should completely copy that document. Our answers, our essays has to be better. So what the preparation of budget does is gives us an understanding what things are important, at least gives us an understanding that these things should not be left. Apart from it, there will be questions directly from the budget. Okay. Now when we talk about directly from the budget, we need to understand how to study. Should we study how much 1000 crore is allocated to different sectors? No, that's not required. The exact figures, exact numbers are not required, but you can study the trend, right? You can study the trend, you can study the different schemes that are there. At the same time, today we will also see the important terms and definitions that are part of budget and the related things. So these are the ways how budget can be useful. That's one thing. Secondly, budget gives you a lot of fodder for your answers. It gives you a lot of fodder for your essay, and your answers and essays are going to get you those additional marks. Because whenever you are writing an essay, your essay needs to be multidimensional, for example. So if it's an economy related essay, you will definitely talk about economy, but you'll talk about the society as well. In society, various things are there you'll talk about. Now budget covers all those things holistically. It talks about economic development, it talks about social development also, inclusive development also, right? So whenever you are talking about different things, you can also talk about what the government has done in this particular thing to improve, or let's say what the present situation is, what we can do. So this document would definitely then become very important for you. So I hope the importance of budget is absolutely clear, right? Especially people who are giving exams this year, right? Now, so let's start with our analysis of interim budget. So the very first question that comes to our mind when we go into the core study of budget is, what is budget and why is it needed? So what is a budget? That's a definition. I want an explanation. You gave me a synonym of budget, that is annual financial statement. I want you to tell me what is budget.
The resources allocated to each department,
Huh?
ministry, every year.
That is resource allocation. Allocating resources to each department and ministry is resource allocation. So what is budget? Pre-planning of the allocation. That is again a part of resource allocation. You are forgetting the part of receipt, right? So it is the plan based on which you decide from where your receipts are going to come from and where are you going to allocate these receipts. Okay, so budget is your plan. It is of course planning. Plan which tells where the money is going to come from. Just to understand, we are writing money. Later on, we will write receipts and expenditure. Where the money is going to come, or where the money is coming from, or the better word will be will. Why will? Because it is estimate. Will, where the money will come from and where money will go. Right? Where the money will come from, where the money will go. Now for us, it is probably very simple. If you have just one single business, one single job, especially for salaried employee, one salary you have, one job you have. So you cannot do anything with respect to where the money is going to come from. All you can focus is on where money will go. If you have multiple businesses, then you can think. Now we are talking about an entire Indian economy. Okay, so since in Indian economy there are various sectors, under various sectors there are different levels of employment. Business persons are there, salaried employees are there, industrial sector is there, primary sector is there, service sector is there, rural agriculture labor, farmers, big landlords, small landlords, innumerable people. So we need to understand where the money will come from and how much will it come. It is an estimate of how much will it come. It's only an estimate. And then when we estimate how much will it come, then we tell where we will use that money. Okay, where we will use that money. So the planning which tells us these two things is your budget. Right. Now the second question is, why is budget required? Huh? Okay, you are getting there. But then why is resource allocation required then? Huh?
To run the country efficiently.
Efficiently is the word. Now, a budget is required because there is scarcity. Scarcity of resources, limitation of resources. Just imagine if I had an unlimited supply of money, I would not plan my month, my year, or my life ahead if I have unlimited supply. In the same manner, the economy may also not do it, because whenever you need, however much you need, you have it. But since you have scarcity of resources, your resources are scarce, you only have X amount of money. So how would you distribute this X amount of money becomes very important. Right? It becomes very important. So because there is scarcity of resources, that is why planning and budgeting both are required. Right? Now we saw budget is also a type of a plan. So what is the relation? What is the relation between, you might have studied planning and you might have studied budgeting. So what is the relation between planning and budgeting? Let's say it is 1979. Now we have annual plans. In 1979 there were annual plans, right? Now tell me, now in 1979 what's the difference between planning and budgeting?
Planning is the vision, the overall thing, what you are budgeting. Budget will be very specific.
Okay, anyone else from here?
Planning doesn't consider the receipt.
Acha, go ahead, please. Planning doesn't consider the receipt is what you're saying. So you mean to say budget is a superset, planning is a subset? Or is it the other way around? It is the other way around. It is the other way around. So planning is a superset. Now budgeting is a part of planning wherein you are understanding where receipts will come, where you will allocate. Planning would have various other things also. Right? And of course, I gave an exclusive example of annual plans, but generally, as what you were saying was correct, planning gives a vision, a broader vision. In budget, you are talking only yearly. Only yearly budget you are making. Why are you making yearly budget and not budgets for 5 years or 10 years?
Changes in year-to-year basis.
Some other reason for that?
Receipts changes yearly.
So, you will still estimate, na? It's still an estimation. Wait, let me answer. Why we are having budget every year, not once in 10 years? See, the thing is, when you are budgeting, when you are estimating how much money you will get, that itself may have error. That itself you may not be able to achieve. Right? Right? You are just estimating it. And there are so many changes rapidly that is happening. The global economy is changing, Indian economy is changing, globalization is there. So a lot of changes are there. So your estimation, if you do for 10 years, it may be grossly errorful. Right? That is why you do on a year-to-year basis. So we have understood why budget is required. Okay. Now let's talk about the budgeting process. How does the budgeting process works? I will ask a question. Who calls for the laying of the budget in both the houses? Calls for laying of budget in both the houses. That is one thing. And so this is who, and also who presents the budget. These nuances will be very important, especially for your prelims. So who calls for laying of the budget? President, right? Who presents the budget? Very good, finance minister. Now, is this call for both houses or only one house? Only one? Only one? Both the houses. The budget is being called to be laid off in both the houses. So please remember, both houses. What about voting? Voting is in only Lok Sabha. Okay, so the budget needs to be laid off in front of both the houses, but when it comes to voting, voting is only in Lok Sabha. Now, why voting only in Lok Sabha and not in Rajya Sabha? Achha, screen is not clear. Yes, please. Sorry? Technical definition, no. I want an understanding. Yes. Someone else? I want someone else to also answer, please. Very good. So in Lok Sabha what? Lok Sabha is the house that is directly elected by the people. Is that the case in Rajya Sabha? No. So it needs to be the directly elected government which should be voting and not the indirectly elected ones. Right? In fact, Rajya Sabha also has, apart from indirectly elected members, what do they have? Nominated members, right? Very good. So that is why only Lok Sabha votes. But when the budget is laid in both the houses, the opposition in Rajya Sabha, they can discuss. General discussion takes place. Okay. So we have understood, called by the president, laid by the finance minister. Now, once the presentation is done, presentation of budget is done. After presentation, what happens? General discussion. So when this time budget was being presented, you might have seen our honorable finance minister presented the budget. After that, there was a general discussion which took place. The opposition, the other personnel, other MPs also comment on this. You may have different parties, spokesperson, representative to share the views on behalf of the entire political parties who are present, the opposition who are present. So a general discussion takes place. After general discussion, what will happen? This is the entire process. So presentation of budget, general discussion, then what happens? Which committee? Parliamentary committee. Okay, specifically I want a name. Estimates committee. Okay, so it goes to the standing committee. It goes to the standing committee. Now, why does it go to the standing committee? They check, they review if there are any issues, any mismatches. If the, people can make mistakes, there can be mistakes. And it's not the MPs entirely who will have so much time or even the acumen to go through that. They have the people who do it from them. They have broad vision, but then vision is executed by, yes, right? So standing committee, it basically reviews. It reviews the grants that are being given to different ministers, different ministries, their allocation, their correctness in the sense that they cannot say that more emphasis should be on this or that, but they need to see that if there is any mistake or not. All those things are reviewed at this stage. So write down standing committee. It reviews or scrutinizes. It scrutinizes. Okay. So after the scrutiny is done, then what will happen? Huh?
Then it is sent for voting in the room.
Ha. So earlier, remember, only a general discussion took place, right? After scrutiny and reviews, now a detailed discussion will take place. Now a detailed discussion will take place, and after the detailed discussion, then it will go for, it will be voted upon. Then there will be voting. Okay? So after detailed scrutiny by standing committee, you have detailed discussion and then voting. Now, one issue which is there here, you know, many a times it is said that there is a hue and cry in the Lok Sabha, so very less time is actually given to discussions, right? Now, why that is said is because here we are talking about detailed discussion of the budget, right? Now, if there is a ruckus that is created due to any reason by the party in power, by the opposition, right? What happens? You get less and less time. You cannot delay it. Let's say you have given 30 days for discussion. Now there was ruckus. You cannot go it to 40, 50 days. You need to pass the budget. Yeah, you need to start utilizing the funds. So what happens then? Then this is cut short. And that should not happen. That is why a lot of people criticize that whenever ruckus is there in Lok Sabha, specifically during this time also, or any other time when important bills are passed, then less discussion takes place, which is not good. So when we are saying detailed discussion and then voting. So things get discussed and voted upon, right? Now, if this is not there, without discussion also, it will go ahead and be voted. If you have enough time, everything will be discussed. If everything is not discussed, not a problem. The government goes ahead with it. Okay? So this is the process. Now voting is done. After voting is done, there are two bills. Two bills that has to be passed basically. So one is, yes, the appropriation bill. The appropriation bill and the finance bill. The appropriation bill and the finance bill. What is the difference between these two bills? I want someone else to answer, guys, please. Everyone is writing when I ask them to answer anyhow. Wait. Yes, what is the difference between appropriation bill and finance bill? Okay, so even if you know the meaning of appropriation, you can probably get to the answer. Appropriation bill is, this bill will talk about taking out money for its utilization. Okay, so by this bill, the government is authorized to use the money which it has. This bill will talk about any changes in the taxes, tax structure, or anything related to that, indirect taxes which are there, right? So this is the difference. This is any legality required for changes in taxation system or anything, like the government has changed the slabs, for example, it will come under this. Increase the taxes, decrease the taxes, whatever they do, it will come under this. And authorizing the government to use the money which it has comes from the appropriation bill.
So it's part A and part B.
No. Part A, part B is different.
Part B is all about taxes.
It is all about taxes, but part A is not about vision only. Now, part A, part B is different. It's like a philosophy of the budget, you can say. Okay, but yes, I get your point. Part B would be more related to this because it talks about all the direct, indirect taxes, any taxation which is there. Part A talks about what is the focus of the government, right? Where it will spend more. We'll see all that. Okay, so the major difference is it is appropriation, authorizing the government to utilize the fund, and this is related to any changes which are there in taxes. Now, both of them, of course, are money bill. Money bill under Article 110. Okay. Money bill under Article 110. Since it's a money bill, only required to be passed by a simple majority by Lok Sabha only. So, passed by simple majority. What is simple majority?
More than half of the present members. Present and voting.
Think what you are speaking. You are saying more than half of present and voting. Are you sure? Then, can you tell me what is the minimum number then it will be required? Because if in Lok Sabha there is a concept of quorum, if 1/10 people are present, quorum is established, right? So if 56 people are there, quorum is there, right? So you are saying if 29 people pass, the budget will be passed? Huh? So that's what I have understood that, but I am just trying to give you an understanding that if just 29 people pass it, the budget will pass. Then what will happen? Huh?
The government will be able to do like changes, bring lot of changes, whatever they want. Less people voting is different.
No, but that is the whole point. Then the opposition will be present. So the practicality becomes completely different. Also, there is a concept of whip. You might have studied in polity. The whip is there of the political party. Boss, tomorrow is voting. All of you have to be present and all of you have to vote like this. Correct? So whip is there. That you would study in polity, right? So now this is clear. The process is clear. Now, why interim budget? Why? Because it is an election year. So if it's an election year, so what? The government? There is a possibility for the government to change. That is why an interim budget is brought in, right? And since the interim budget is brought in, for example, now the government has got vote on demands and appropriated money equivalent to 4 months. Okay, 4 months of money they have appropriated. So that is 1/3 of money. Because the term of now the elections are supposed to happen somewhere in April, May, and the term of this Lok Sabha will probably end on 16th of June. Right? So, and anyhow the budget comes into force on April 1st. Right? So April, May, June. June 16 would be 2.5 months plus another 1.5 months they have, because then the government would change, and all of a sudden you don't have everything in place. You will have to choose who will be the minister for what. So that is why 4 months of appropriation is done. Okay, this is also clear. So if the government changes, so what? You can still would have come up with the entire year's budget.
New government, new ideology.
Huh?
They can't take important decisions for that period of time.
Okay.
Implementation of new policies. So
The vision would be different, the emphasis would be different, the focus would be different, right? So the focus area would be different, so the allocations may change, and it should be they who should decide, because they are the ones who the people have chosen. All right? So that is also clear. Now let's come to the components of budget. Components of budget. So budget has two parts to it if we talk about revenue budget and capital budget, right? So you will have revenue budget and capital budget. And when we are using the term budget, so you will have receipts and expenditure. So you will have revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. In the same manner, here you will have capital receipts and capital expenditure. Now what is the difference between revenue expenditure, revenue receipts, capital expenditure, capital receipts? Yes?
Receipts in the sense there is no liabilities.
Receipts in the sense more liabilities. Receipts?
No.
Receipt is what you get. Anyhow, the difference is not account of receipt. Here also you have receipts. Here also you have receipts.
Okay, so
Expenditure, expenditure. The difference lies in revenue and capital.
yeah, revenue in the sense there is no liability, revenue receipt.
No liability.
Yeah. And capital receipt in a sense there is a liability. For example, revenue receipt, we can say toll and all those things.
Okay.
Taxes, tolls and all. And capital receipt in a sense IMF loans and all.
What else? You have directly borrowed money. What else? How?
Revenue expenditure, expenditure in a sense will be
You gave an example of loans in capital receipt, right? That is a debt creating capital receipt. What is an example of non-debt creating capital receipt? Non-debt creating capital receipt? Disinvestment. Again, an easy way out. Great. Fine. Okay. So, revenue receipts, revenue expenditure, day-to-day activities that are there. Paying for salaries and all. Everyday requirement, overhead costs, all these things. It is not creating any asset. So, when you talk about revenue receipt or you talk about revenue expenditure. So when there is revenue expenditure, no asset is created. Whenever there is an expenditure after which no asset is created, it is a revenue expenditure. So when you give salary to someone, is an asset created? No. Right? In capital expenditure, what happens? If we talk about capital expenditure, when you do capital expenditure, an asset will be created. For example, you build a hospital, you build a institution, you build roads, metros, railways. It's a capital expenditure because that there is an asset that has been created. And once the asset is created, this asset will lead to revenue generation for you. Right? So you build nice expressways, you get a lot of tolls from there. Right? So asset is created, then it's capital expenditure. Since asset is created, you can generate revenue. In revenue expenditure, no asset is created. At the same time, what about revenue receipt? It is those receipts, when you get that money, there is no liability. No liability incurred. A receipt after which no liability is incurred, that is a revenue receipt. Since we gave salary to someone, we could not create any asset. In the same manner, if we get salary for something, we will not have any liability. We have already worked, we got the salary, there is no liability to pay that off. Right? In capital receipt, what will happen? There will be a liability.
When you give the salary, it doesn't come under receipt and all like this.
No, it is an expenditure. When I am giving salary to you, it's an expenditure for me, but it's a receipt for you. Understood? You know, if this road goes from X to Y, the same road comes from Y to X. So the perspective is different. If I am giving you the salary, so for me it is a revenue expenditure. You are receiving the salary. So for you it is what? It is a receipt. Receipt matlab it is receiving, yaar, that's it, nothing else. It's just simply receiving it. Receipt, capital receipt, revenue receipt. So when there is capital receipt, when you are receiving capital receipt, what happens? A liability. Either a liability will be created or asset will be gone. So let me write down here clearly. When you have capital receipt, two things can happen. Liability created or asset decreased. Now how is this happening? Someone gave an example of loans from IMF. I think you gave that example. So when you are taking loans, there is a liability to repay it. Right? Here someone gave the example of disinvestment. So when you are disinvesting, you had PSU as your asset. Now you completely sold it off 51%, 49%, you disinvested. So you reduced, your assets have reduced. Basically you have sold out the particular PSU, which was an asset. So asset has decreased. So in capital receipt, either liability will be created or asset will be lowered. Correct? In revenue receipt, neither liability will be created nor asset will be lowered. Clear? Any doubts in this? Right? Now under revenue receipt you have tax receipts and non-tax receipts. So tax we know, direct taxes, indirect taxes, GST is there, corporate tax, service tax, professional tax, whatever taxes are there, it comes under tax receipts. What comes under non-tax receipts? Fines, fees. How will grants to state come under receipts? Sorry? No, we are talking about the union budget here. Let's not get confused. You know, very nicely when I said how it will come under receipt, people are like, for state it is receipt. We are talking from the perspective of the union government. Okay? So what? Fines, fees, what else? Huh? Remittances, dividends. So dividends and profits are sort of one and the same thing. Dividends, all those revenue which the government can generate either by providing you facility and charging fees, or bringing in laws, charging you more and getting the fines. Instead of when accidents increased, when the accidents increased few years back, there was an increase in the accident as per a report, government report only. What did they do? Increase the fines instead of repairing the roads. All right. Why? Because it's a very psychological thing. If I am riding a bike in my area, I know the terrain. If a new person is there, that person does not know it. More susceptible to accidents. Right? So they increase the fines. Fair enough. Having said that, okay, one more thing is there. When you give loans, you get some interest. So the interest amount that you get, interest on loans.
Grants received by other countries.
That also will come. Now I was coming on to that point. Interest on loans is also a non-tax receipt. Now as you said, grants received by country. So very important fact over here is, earlier India used to receive more grants and almost not give, and then started giving. Now India has started, so that shift has and non-debt creating. So debt creating means when you are getting those kind of capital receipts, there is a debt on you. For example, loans. Non-debt creating as in when you get receipts, there is no debt which you have to pay, but the asset can go down. Asset has to go down for the definition to be of capital expenditure. So here you would have disinvestment. Right? And capital expenditure, when capital expenditure is there, building your roads, railways, metros, all these projects, capital will be formed, asset will be created. Okay, so what are the examples of it? Soft loan is nothing but loans. What do we mean by the word soft? Soft means the interest rate is low. So for example, India got soft loans in 2016-17 from Japan for bullet trains at 1 to 2% interest rate. Now it's a great thing, but it was a beneficial thing for Japan as well. Why? Because it was dealing with very low inflation, very slow growth rate. as good as it was going into the negative. Negative means if you will keep 100 rupees in Japan's bank and then 1 year later you withdraw, you will get only 97 back. Because they wanted you to not keep it in the bank, use it, because their economy had slowed down. So they want you to use it so that economy can grow. So that was one of the reasons we could also get. So that's a very interesting thing. It helped us also, it helps them also, right? So these are the components of your budget. Now let us see them one by one, or let's say write down a bit. I think we have already seen them while we were discussing this, right? Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Types of budget. Write down types of budget. We have seen the components. We have seen the components. Now we'll write the types of budget. Now in types of budget, whatever types we will be discussing, now when it comes to Indian government coming out with budget, Indian government does not have just one type based on which it comes. It utilizes various different types of budgeting for different things, right? For example, we have let's say gender based budgeting, outcome budgeting, performance budgeting. We'll see all that later. Now when I talk about types, let's start with types of budget. Now types of budget can be classified on different kinds of things. So one, you can classify based on the expenditure and receipts. The other you can classify based on the characteristic nature, philosophy of the budgets. So that characteristic nature, philosophy, or the process how it differs, under that we'll talk about zero based budgeting, gender budgeting, outcome budgeting, performance budgeting. Right now first let's look at the very simplest form of budget, that is your balanced budget. Balanced budget. Then next you will have deficit budget and surplus budget. Okay, so it's very obvious. Balanced budget, whatever you are getting as a receipt, it is equivalent to your expenditure. So here expenditure is equals to receipt. Expenditure equal to receipt. Correct? Is this correct? So if you are getting, let's say, 46 lakh crore, 46 lakh if you are getting, and you are spending the same amount, so the difference between expenditure and receipt is zero, so it is there. In deficit budget, what will happen? Expenditure is more, expenditure greater than receipt. Now what kind of budget does India have? Deficit budget. Okay. Now the question was not that. The question is now, why does India have deficit budget is clear. It's very technically clear. The question is to you. Will you be happy if so deficit budget as in expenditure is more. You have less money, you have to spend more. That is deficit budget. Surplus budget is when you get more and spend less. So will you be happy if India has a surplus budget? I am asking her. Tell me. Won't you be happy you are getting more, you are spending less? Why no? Because they said no. Then now you said no properly. Why?
Because we need to sell, we need to spend it. But obviously, if we get more, we need to spend it more. If you're not spending, then it is not.
Okay. Yes. So should India have deficit budget or surplus budget? Wait.
For the utilization of
Huh?
must happen for the
So, of course, these guys know the answer. So, see, India is a developing country. Okay, just imagine. See, India is a developing country. We are developing country. We are facing problems. We are facing problems of poverty. Guys. Any questions? Ask me, please. All right. We are facing issues of poverty. We are facing issues of hunger. We are facing issues of homelessness. We are facing issue of begging. So many things we are facing. So basically, we need to have more socio-economic development. Right. Now, under such situation that we are facing these issues and people are literally dying also because of that, just imagine a scenario that the government received 45 lakh crores and it spent only 44 lakh crores. And it has how much remaining? 1 lakh crore. So, in such a situation, is it advisable to keep this money with you? No. You should spend this also, boss. People are dying. Literally. So that is why it is not going to happen, at least not in the near future, foreseeable future, that we will have surplus budget. We are bound to have a deficit budget. And if this is the thing, it will be heavily criticized and the government may be voted out of power if we start voting based on these things, right? So having said that, that is why deficit budget in the near future also. If we have 100% socio-economic development at saturation level and then we are getting too much of receipts and it is getting saved, that's a different thing. But in the present scenario, please understand, deficit budget is what is going to happen, right? But then, to what extent the deficit should be? It should be to a level which is manageable. All right, it should be manageable. We cannot then say, okay, sir, then do one thing. Let's have 100% deficit and let's finish all the problems. It's not going to work that way. How are we going to repay it? That will lead to other problems. And with so much of additional money all at once, one more thing needs to be focused upon, that when a government spends 1 rupee on any social sector scheme, any scheme, only 40 paisa reaches the beneficiary. So that's the amount of leakages which is also there. Okay?
So have we ever experienced surplus budget?
No, never. Countries with surplus budget, maybe Scandinavian countries. We'll have to check that. Scandinavian countries can have that, but as such, no country comes up with a surplus budget. No country comes up with a surplus budget because anyhow they have still to grow better. No, that would probably, that's why I said it will happen when you have socio-economic development, let's say at 100%, as in it is completely saturated. It's a very extreme or very ideal condition, and at that same time you are getting a much more receipt than what you can spend. Or else, as far as expenditure is concerned, there is no limit to it. Okay, so theoretically yes, it's possible, but practically we haven't seen that. But if it may ever come, it may come to the developed nations first probably, or it can come in place wherein there is no democracy, for example. Yes, any questions?
So then, what about after independence? I mean, like after the framing of the constitution, like
Huh.
1951, because that time is the first year where we have first planned all those things.
Correct.
So we didn't focus very much on the socio-economic development, right? So that time it should be a surplus budget, right?
No. We did not focus on socio-economic. See, socio-economic development is just one sector where you spend. You can spend on other things also. So when you talk about the first 5-year plan, your focus was on the agricultural sector. Agricultural sector. From 1951 to 56, the focus was agricultural sector because people did not have food to eat. Right? So, calculating poverty line and everything will come later. There is just basic need of food. So, at least produce as much food as people need. That was the focus. Second 5-year plan, we went to heavy industries. So, when you are going into heavy industries, again, you are not putting money in, let's say, social sector scheme, poverty, hunger, but you are still putting money here, right? So, money was put here. The idea was, when I put money here, I am going to get revenue at a faster pace, and that revenue I can utilize for socio-economic development, okay? But this did not succeed much. It is sort of a failure to an extent, right? Because developing heavy industries takes a lot of doing. So what we did from the third 5-year plan onwards, we reverted back to agriculture. Heavy industry was still there, but agriculture again became the main focus, and heavy industries became the secondary focus. Afterwards, when by 1969, especially by the coming of Green Revolution, we achieved accessible food. We had how much we wanted, but we had the excess. The problem then was, by 1969, due to Green Revolution, we had the excess of food, right? So we were self-sufficient with respect to excess, but what was the problem? Money, right? So if in this room there are 40 people, I have enough food grains for 40 people, but all of you do not have money to buy it, right? So physical excess was there, financial excess was not there. So after 1969, then the government started focusing more on financial access, PDS system, everything came. Now what is the focus? Again, financial accessibility is the focus. Now a third accessibility has come in, that is green accessibility. Green accessibility is to have organic farming, green farming. That is why now in UPSC also you will see questions related to green farming a lot. Questions related to organic farming, questions related to sustainable farming, right? So right now we have to address three things. One is physical access of food grains. Then we need to ensure financial access. And then we need to ensure the green access. Okay, this is what we need to ensure. Correct? By Green Revolution, we did have physical access, but the problem was it required more input. You need to apply fertilizers. You need to buy high yielding variety seeds. So the input cost itself was higher. That is why things became costlier. So when things became costlier, no financial access. So what will the government do? Very good. Subsidies. Government kept on giving subsidies. Okay. So I hope this is clear that we never had a surplus budget. Initially, we were not spending so much on social sector scheme, or even right now, for example, we spend so much on sports also. That much amount was not spent at that time. Why? Because other things were spent on. Okay.
If we stop spending on military, like the other countries, developed countries, will it be budget surplus? Because Scandinavian countries doesn't spend that much on military, I think, because of that.
Spending on military also depends upon the countries surrounded by which neighbors.
Yeah, I'm saying if it is reduced, then is it possible?
There is a simple definition of surplus and deficit. If you spend less, earn more, it's a surplus. That's one thing. Now the question is from where to reduce. So you are giving defense sector to be reduced from, right? So yes, if you reduce it from the defense sector, because we have a good amount of expenditure, we may come under surplus. But would you want to do that? No, that's the answer, right? So just the definition of surplus is very simple. You are receiving more, spending less. Now how can you, either you get some big sources from where you receive, for surplus, you need to either increase your receipt or reduce your expenditure, or do both simultaneously, right? So if you are not able to receive more, you are thinking of lowering the expenditure. So you are saying, can I lower the expenditure in defense? You gave an example of Scandinavian countries, but then the Scandinavian countries are surrounded by other peaceful countries. India is not, right? So we cannot afford to lower our expense on defense. I hope that is very clear. The internal policies, not just the amount of defense budget we have to give. In fact, we would want to give more, but we are not able to, because in India there is always a trade-off. So when it comes to defense, when it comes to India's own internal policies as well, internal policies and laws which are there, this is to a very great extent influenced by the countries surrounding India. Trying to go to moon, Mars, all those things. So that can be one question you may ask, sir, can we lower the expenditure on these things? Yes. Yes, we can, but should we? Why no? Wait, why no?
Development of the country on basis of space technologies nowadays is required.
What is happening? If we are going on Mars, what is happening? Anyhow, Elon Musk will go and then ask everyone to come, right? So let him go. Yes? It's a priority. Why is it more of a priority than someone who is...
I'm saying it's not that.
You are saying it's not that priority. So we should lower it. Okay. Anyone who would say that? To lower the investment in space research.
For security of the countries, for example, if suppose
Going on to Mars is related to security of the country.
Mars generally,
No, so we can lower the Mars expedition, moon expedition. Are you okay with that?
no sir, I'm saying like that. For example, like now the major thing for the space research is the competition between the countries.
Huh.
For example, if US is stepping into the, well, if it is too focused on space research than the India, then it will start spying on our countries. So that it will be like, it will result into the kind of some other issues like the nuclear wars and all those things, because since they are spying on all our technology.
So going to Mars helps us spy.
Not only Mars, like all.
So there are certain things where you can lower, is what you're saying? With respect to spying abilities, we should do it. Other thing we should stop.
I mean, like one more reason I could say, but like
Do you think USA is not already spying?
particularly I'm talking about all the countries, not only US, all the countries.
Do you think that USA will not give its data to the friendly countries? Right? NATO. Do you think NATO will not have the data? So what should be done?
Balance the both.
Balance. There is always a trade-off. Okay. So see, the thing is, what happens is whenever India achieves, India is achieving a lot of great things in space research and defense research, DRDO, and guys, please, others are getting disturbed. Thank you. So what India is doing is achieving great things under space research. You have ISRO, right? As well as you have DRDO, right? So now whenever we achieve great things, you may see other countries reacting to it, their tabloids, their newspapers reacting to it, coming up with cartoons and everything saying that India, there is hunger, people are dying and they are going in space, right? So that should not deter us from doing that, because see, anyhow we are right now we are doing so amazing over here. I'll tell you, there is an arm of ISRO that is called as, now this is a commercial arm, commercial. Whenever any Indian space object is let's say orbiting the space, we also take some other countries' satellites with us. So they pay us. We get the money from them. So we have already started a commercial arm to get more money. That is one thing. Secondly, when you talk about space research, throwing satellites into the orbit, now the technology and everything is similar to the one used in missiles. right? So when you are developing this, you are as good as developing this. The only change that happens is on top there is a satellite, here there will be a warhead. The warhead can be nuclear, non-nuclear. So by developing this, you are anyhow developing this. Plus what you have is geospatial satellites. You have satellites to monitor. You can use satellites to check the, help the environment. You have weather satellites. So in the long run, this is going to help us. This is going to help us with more productivity of farm produce, with all those things. At the same time, in 1999 Kargil war, when it was there, we were not provided by this system. Now we have our very own system, right? So just imagine this was not provided, how much it could have been impacted. We still won the war, but it could have impacted, and then all the spending and all you are talking about would go to waste, right? So we have to spend, because even this in the long run helps the economy. So whenever any issue is there, you will do two things. One, immediate correction. Immediate correction is provide free employment. You are giving, let's say, you are giving food crops at cheaper price, PDS system is there, right? At the same time, long term, you need to have weather satellite to give weather forecast. Now you get weather forecast, right? There is a Kisan TV which is there, which tells you the weather forecast and everything. How is that possible with our own satellites? Also, you have created a commercial arm to get more money. So this has to be there, right? But a more efficient way, and this is also a very good way to do it. The friendly countries that we have, we put their satellites also into space and earn some money from it. Okay, so this is clear, right? Socio-economic development. So we understood the difference of surplus, balanced and deficit budget. Now write down the types of deficits. So since we have understood the deficit deficit is when expenditure is more than receipt. So now we will write down types of deficits. So write down number one, budget deficit. Budget deficit. Budget deficit is very simple. Total expenditure minus total receipt. Under budget, anyhow, you will have two components, revenue and capital. So when you have under budget, you will have revenue and capital. It will be similar things over here. Revenue deficit will be what? Total? No. Yes. Total revenue expenditure. Total revenue expenditure minus total revenue receipt. Under capital deficit, what will be there? Right. It's very simple. So these three things are simple. Now we will go on to the conceptual types of deficit, which I'll tell you. Capital expenditure minus total capital receipt. Right. So write this down. Budget deficit equals total expenditure minus total receipt. Revenue is revenue expenditure minus revenue receipt. Capital deficit is capital expenditure minus total capital receipt. Clear? Everyone written this? Now I will keep budget deficit as it is, and I am going to write here fiscal deficit. What is fiscal deficit?
When the government spends more than what is
Define. Here we have written the total expenditure, total receipt. Like that, what is fiscal deficit?
budget minus the borrowing.
Sorry, please be loud.
Budget deficit minus the borrowings we get. Grants we get.
Exactly, exactly. So fiscal deficit would be total expenditure is here also, right? Here also there is total expenditure. Total expenditure as in revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure. But here it's not total receipts. It is revenue receipts minus revenue receipts plus non-debt creating capital expenditure. Non-debt creating capital expenditure. So you minus this entire component. What is this component? Revenue receipt plus non-debt creating capital expenditure. Non-debt creating as in when you are having that capital capital receipt, sorry. When you are having this capital receipt, you are not creating any debt for yourself. Right? So loans or borrowings which you are talking about will not be present here. Money from, let's say, disinvestment, selling it off, those will be here. Okay? So if now it will so happen that fiscal deficit would be higher than budget deficit if you have some amount of borrowing. Correct? If there is zero borrowing, then both the things will be equal. But the moment there is any sort of borrowing, your fiscal deficit will be more. Is this concept clear? You look confused? Clear? Right? So instead of total, what is total receipt? Total receipt is revenue receipt plus capital receipt. Capital receipt has two parts, non-debt creating and debt creating. So we have removed the debt creating part from this. Okay? So write this down clearly. Fiscal deficit is clear. Now next write down primary deficit. Write down primary we already have budget deficit, so why to calculate fiscal deficit also? Yes? Yeah, be loud.
It is not the borrowing is not included.
That's the definition. But why do we have to calculate fiscal deficit also? Because anyhow, if you are borrowing and it is creating a debt, you have to give it back. Right? So to understand the health of the economy for real, you need to calculate this. Right? You need to remove the borrowings. This is the borrowing, I'll have to give it. Right? I need to see without borrowing what deficit I still have. Right? So that is why we remove the borrowing, because that is creating debt. Later on I have to pay it back.
It tells the real deficit of the government.
Actually how much is the deficit? Because budget deficit is going to give a wrong picture. Right? Budget deficit, because you are getting borrowing also, you are including that as well. So you may think everything is fine. If your monthly expense is 1 lakh and your salary is 75,000, 25,000 you are taking loan. So if you take loan also into account, you will think, yeah, 1 lakh expenditure, 1 lakh salary, fine. But you need to remove that loan part in order to understand how much deficit you actually have, to give the real picture, so as to switch your job. Right? All right. Having said that, fiscal deficit is clear. Now let's move on to primary deficit. What is primary deficit? No, someone else, please. No. Someone.
Fiscal deficit minus loan payment, interest payment received.
Don't be enemy of your friends, yaar.
Interest payment.
Let them learn, let them think. Don't be so selfish. You think we are friends, we are prompting? No, absolutely not. If my best friend was sitting here, he will never prompt. After the class, he'll kick me and say, study well. That's how friendship works. Right? So let's not prompt, let's give others also an equal chance. Yes, please.
Fiscal deficit minus interest loan received.
Fiscal primary deficit equals fiscal deficit minus
Interest payment
received on loans. ठीक है. Why is it calculated? Why is it calculated?
To know the actual deficit, like even we would have given the other countries grants. So based on that, we get some interest back. So including that, how much deficit is there in the country?
Okay. So there you guys have a bit of mixed it up. There's some mixed up. Yes, you want to say something? No, na? Good. Yes. Next. You know the question I have asked?
Yeah.
What is the question I have asked?
Why do we calculate the primary deficit?
Yes.
I mean, apart from loans to other countries, I can't think of.
No, it's not related to giving loans to other countries. No, it's rather. Hello, listen here. Listen. It's not related to we giving loans to any country. It is related to we are getting loans. We are taking loans, so we will pay interests, right? So understand, when you take a home loan, for example, you take a home loan of, let's say, 35 lakh home loan you have taken. Okay. Now you have taken it for 15 years, for example, right? Now what happens is your monthly installment is, let's say, around 34,000, right? Your interest rate was 8.9%, correct? Now when you are paying 34,000 every month, how much do you think is going as interest? No. Around 27,000 will go as interest. And only 7,000 will go as principal. And meaning interest is more, principal is less. For this to reverse, it may take around 10 years. After that, it will be reversed. Why they are doing this? They are taking as much interest as possible from you in the beginning, because I have taken loan. I took loan because I did not have money. So initially I would not be more capable to return it back or pay more EMIs. So they would try to extract as much as I can. And let's say 10 years later, when I'm capable to pay all at once, it's all the principal amount I would be paying. So that's what the banks do. They don't do it like this. They have this way, getting interest as soon as possible. No, it's not spread evenly. No, absolutely not. That is why initially as much of it you can pay, it's good. After 10 years, it won't be that much effective, because 80-90% would be as good as principal. Okay. So because of this, what is happening? When we take loans, right, a lot of it is going in interest also, right? So when it goes in interest, it has nothing to do with the production, how much you are generating, how much you are spending. It is an unnecessary burden of the past, right? So you need to, when there is unnecessary burden of the past, you will not be able to understand how good you are doing presently. To get a better picture of the present, you calculate primary deficit, right? How my economy is doing, am I on the right track or not? So the past burden of interest is there, you remove it. So this would be fiscal deficit minus interest liabilities, basically. Fiscal deficit minus interest liabilities. So primary deficit would actually be lesser than fiscal deficit if we have interest liabilities to give, correct? If we have no interest liabilities, then both will be equal. But primary deficit generally would be, right, lesser than the fiscal deficit. Clear? Now, the next term, monetized deficit. Monetized deficit. Write down monetized deficit. What is monetized deficit? See, you have primary deficit or you have fiscal deficit, right? Now, what you do, how you cover that gap? You can cover that, how do you cover that gap? Yes, but if you're not earning more, that's why there is fiscal deficit year on year. So you have a lot of money stored with the RBI also, right? So when you take that money from the RBI to cover the gap of your deficit, that is known as monetizing deficit or monetized deficit. That deficit is now monetized. That deficit you have filled with the money by taking the money from the RBI.
So, but certain percentage will be kept at RBI.
Yes, certain percentage will be kept, but then the government can change that percentage also, right? Of course, a certain percentage will be kept, so there will be a floor amount will be kept. Anything above it from this tranche you can take it out, or if the government, let's say, wants more, few years back it was the case that the government was asking money from the RBI, right? So the government can also lower the floor rate, right? So they would take money from the RBI. So write down monetized deficit equals. So whatever money the government takes from the RBI would be equivalent to the deficit they have monetized. Write down. So write down monetized deficit equals borrowing from the RBI. Borrowing from the RBI. Now, one more thing you have to write down. Borrowing from RBI plus lowering, borrowing from the RBI, borrowing as in you have pledged to give it back. So borrowing will also happen. We understood that it simply reduces the cash or it borrows. So one is borrowing from the RBI or lowering the cash of RBI. So when you have lowered the cash with the RBI, you do not intend to pay back. When you borrow from the RBI, you intend to pay back. So from the RBI, whatever money you take for addressing the deficit gap is equivalent to your monetized deficit.
Sir, I might be wrong here, I don't remember precisely, but when that issue happened with which you told that government wanted money from RBI, they made a certain rules that certain percentage should be kept at RBI.
Yes.
Any other excess should be transferred to the government.
Yes.
So from where will they borrow? From the RBI. So they have already transferred everything to the government.
No. See, what happens from borrowing is, so you are saying from the surplus, right?
Yes, sir.
So when there is surplus,
It's automatically
yes, it is automatically transferred. You are saying that provision is made. But what happens is, does the government want to transfer it back and let there be surplus or not? That is also one thing. So as to have a higher buffer, right? So for example, if 100 rupees 100 was that limit, now RBI has rupees 150. So what will happen? 50 rupees will go, but government takes it in the form of borrowing so that, to keep a buffer, that the government also has RBI's money to keep an additional buffer. That's all. You will see wherever we go in the economy, we keep on having buffers, right? So that if one thing fails, there is buffer for the next thing, and if that fails, we have a buffer for that thing. In the construction industry, however, it works the other way around. Just to give an additional example here, in construction field, there is a factor of safety. Factor of safety which you take. So factor of safety for, let's say, concrete thing would be 1.5. For steel related thing, it will be, let's say, 2. So the person who's doing steel work, the person thinks 2 factor of safety is there, so let me do some dilution here. Person who's doing concrete work says that 1.5 factor of safety is there, so let me use a lower strength of concrete. So everyone, what they do is keep on lowering it. When they keep on lowering it, it gets compounded. And when it's compounded, it would lead to a disaster. This is one of the very big factors why you find things failing. Yes.
So that you said that 150 it will give 50 rupees to the as the borrowing money it will give. So is that 100 rupees what it kept is from the spread amount what it kept?
Yes. Yes.
Or it is from the cash reserve ratio?
No, it's not from the cash reserve ratio. Cash reserve ratio, government has nothing to do with it. It is with respect to bank and RBI.
Sir, but RBI can't give the spread money to someone, right?
Spread money as in spread on what? It's not.
No, I mean like for example, if like when I'm just depositing 1,000 rupees in.
It's not our money which is with the RBI, which the RBI is giving.
Banks.
It is not. It is not. This 100 rupees, the RBI does not have any liability. There is no liability of RBI on this. This is RBI's reserves. RBI has reserves of two types. One is foreign exchange reserve, one is reserve of Indian rupee. So this is the reserve with the RBI. It is not having any liability. Okay? Clear? All right. So let's take a 10 minutes break and then reconvene at 11:35. All right? Thank you. Yes, yes, please.
Monetized deficit, sir. In this monetized deficit, we can't get from RBI as like we want now, sir. Like we have ways and means, like only in cash mismatching time we can get. Like
So yes, anytime you cannot ask. Yes, when
only
cash
during
mismatches,
that
yes.
time, only that time
Yes.
or in
See, the thing is, when we do not have cash, then we can ask. So fiscal deficit
we will
is.
try other everything.
Yes,
or
yes,
at
that is the
last.
last resort. Yes, that is correct.
But
It's the last resort.
I'm asking this only during cash.
Yes, when we do not have enough cash. So instead of printing, we take it from the RBI because printing would be a worse thing to do. I'll mention this in the class. This is very simple. Deficit. What is budget? Budget means whatever you are getting receipts and the expenditure, right? So when expenditure is more and receipts are less, there will be a deficit, right? So that is budget deficit.
Sir, receipts means?
Whatever money the government is getting, tax revenue, non-tax revenue, fines, this, that, anything. The government is, you earn some amount of money, you spend some amount of money. So if your expenditure earning is less, you will have less money. So that difference is budget deficit. Revenue, budget has two components, revenue and capital. So if revenue receipt is less and revenue expenditure is more, so revenue deficit. If capital receipt is less, capital expenditure is more, capital deficit. Let's say you have two jobs. You know, from one job you pay for the house, from one job you pay for food. So from one job for which you are paying from the house, if that salary is less than the amount you have to pay for the house, you will have deficit in that. If the other job also gives you less money, then you have to pay for food, again there will be deficit. So this revenue and capital is a part of the entire budget, right?
Sir, this monetized deficit.
If when there is fiscal deficit, you need to close this gap. So for closing this gap, if you go to the RBI for wanting money from the RBI, so whatever amount you take from the RBI to close this gap, that amount is your monetized deficit. You have monetized that deficit. You have closed that deficit by asking for money.
So in this, like total deficit, does it include what the money we are receiving from the other countries also?
It includes everything. Everything.
So can you explain this interest liabilities again, this primary deficit?
Primary deficit is fiscal deficit.
Okay.
That is fine. But we might have taken some loans on which we have to give interest.
Okay.
So it's a liability on us. So we need to minus that. Why? Because from other countries, when we are getting loans, we'll have to pay some interest. So we need to minus the interest, so as to get a clear picture. Or else what will happen, our economy may be doing very well, but we may have huge loans and huge interest. So we may still have a big fiscal deficit. But to understand how the economy is doing, we need to calculate the primary deficit by removing the interest which we are paying.
Okay, only the interest we are removing.
Only the interest we are removing.
So in all this deficit, is fiscal deficit is good for the development or the primary deficit is good? I mean, I'm asking which deficit is actually good for the development of the country? Because
Primary deficit.
Primary deficit.
For example, if there is fiscal deficit and primary deficit. So when fiscal deficit is equal to primary deficit, that means there is no interest liabilities.
Okay.
So that is a better situation.
Okay. So primary deficit is a better.
You cannot say it's a better thing.
When it is both matches.
No, it's like in fiscal deficit, the part of interest liability should be very less. The lesser it is, the better it is.
Okay.
Right? That's that.
Sir, will RBI provide loans to state governments? State governments?
No.
Only for
It has to center, yes.
Sir, at low interest or
Repo rate.
repo rate?
It's lower interest, of course. Or even
Sir, it has to
lower.
repay without,
If it is a loan, they have to repay it. Yes.
within the term of
Term period. Yes. You guys have chosen optional papers. So what are your optionals? How many psychology? Nice. How many anthropology? Others? PSIR. How many PSIR? Others? You? PSIR. Any other optional? Okay, so short. PSIR optional? Then? Yes. Psychology. Nice. Guess my optional. No. Yeah, I am an engineer, but I had sociology as an optional. Huh? Yeah. You know, na? All right, guys, let's continue. Guys, let's continue. You guys make so much of noise. The three of you. Calm down. All right, so let's continue now. We'll now move on to types of government budgeting. Okay, types of government budgeting. So the very first type is, see, in budgeting what was happening, whatever money we get, we are allocating on different things based on the requirement. Okay, and with respect to India, there is always a trade-off. Why is there a trade-off? Because you cannot do everything. So if you are increasing in some area, you have to probably reduce in some other area, right? There is always a trade-off. Now, now there are different types of budget. These are different approaches for budgeting. So for example, how much I have to allocate for what sector can be influenced by a lot of things, right? So what approaches I can take to allocate different things to different sectors is what we will study here. So number one is performance budgeting. Performance budgeting. So here in this approach, we will see what have been the performance. What has been the performance? So, for example, India wants to lower its poverty, right? Now, there are ways to do it. There are ways to do it by PDS cycle, right? Public distribution system. Also through Manrega scheme, for example, right? But now the government needs to check their performance, right? There are, like this, there are various social sector schemes which the governments will come up with, and different social sector schemes will perform differently, will have different performance. By that you can calculate, if in, there are, let's say, X, Y and Z things. Here you have spent A amount of money, B amount of money, C amount of money. What was the performance? Right? So let's say I'm spending 100 rupees here and I'm getting 100 people out of poverty. I'm spending 100 rupees here, I'm getting 90 people out of poverty. I'm spending 100 rupees here, I'm getting 80 people out of poverty. So I see my performance. Now, if this performance is the best, I cannot start and spending entire 300 here and make it 0 here, 0 here. But probably my emphasis can be more here, right? So you are seeing so that is why in the past there needs to be some allocation in order for us to see performance. We are not interpreting or estimating, we are seeing the performance of the previous years. So what has been the performance? We see this performance data, and based on this performance data, or without performance data, what we might have done? Increase by the same amount, or let's say we might have increased more here and less here. So our efficiency would have gone down. Now we may not stop it, but if there is an increase, probably it becomes 120, this becomes 90 and this becomes 90, right? So it makes our budgeting process more efficient when you take into account the past performances. All right, so write down performance budgeting. It uses performance information. It uses performance information. Performance budgeting, it uses performance information for allocation of funds and management of programs. For allocation of funds and management of programs. Aimed to increase for allocation of funds and management of programs aimed to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of public expenditure. Efficiency and effectiveness of public expenditure. Efficiency and effectiveness of public expenditure. So performance based budgeting is clear. Now we move on to outcome budgeting. Okay. So if in general you will understand budgeting, you allocate some amount, you know, this 34,000 crore is, let's say, allocated to Manrega, right? Next year we increase it by 5% or decrease it by 10%, that kind of thing. But in outcome budgeting, what happens is you are very clear on what outcome you want. Okay. So it is the reverse which happens. You first decide the outcome. So write down under outcome budgeting, write down the first step is to decide the outcome. Once you decide the outcome, what outcome you want, then you basically plan the interventions. Interventions as in what steps needs to be taken, which schemes needs to be brought in, what needs to be done, what needs to be my intervention. Alright. So first you decided the outcome, then you planned the intervention. Once the intervention is planned, now you allocate the budget for implementing this intervention which you have planned. Right. Last comes the allocation of funds to execute or implement the intervention, the planned intervention. Correct? This is the process of outcome. Any questions? No question? Is this clear? Clear? So what is the difference between performance and outcome?
Outcome focuses on the goal, performance focuses on the efficiency.
And that too of the past efficiency. What have been the efficiency? Here we are focusing what is the future outcome it's going to be. Right? And you know, India has always been amazing in taking the best from things and utilizing it. So here also we do not have one single approach everywhere. We may have different approaches, we may have a mix of approaches. For example, we will use performance budgeting to understand in which scheme we have to, let's say, increase more. Once we have done that through performance budgeting, then we come to outcome budgeting. That was in this I have to do it. Now what outcome do I want? What plan do I have to, what the plan of intervention is and how much I need to allocate. So you can use a mix of two different types of budgeting as well. Clear? Right? So different approaches for different things. At the same time, for one thing you can have multiple approaches one after the other. Write down the next one. Zero-based budgeting. Next one is zero-based budgeting. Any idea what this will be?
It starts from scratch every single time.
Very good. Very good. It starts from scratch every single time. Why? What's the benefit of doing that? Very good. Very good. So, you know, when I was staying in Mumbai for over 4.5 years, I had one rented flat. Now, if I am paying 25,000 for an unfurnished 1 BHK flat in Mumbai, every year what I am doing is, if the agreement increases and my rent increases by 5%, I allocate 5% additional fund. Then another 5% additional. I am just thinking about 25 is anyhow gone, over and above how much I have to give. So in budgeting also that is happening. You have taken for granted, yeah, you have normalized it, yes, this expenditure is anyhow going to be there, fine. You know, once I rented a flat, I was there in that only forever till the time I was there, right? So it kept on increasing. I started allocating more funds. But if every year I would have revisited my decision to stay here, it would have changed. Probably I would have got a better place at lower price, or I would have managed my finances in a different way. Might have got a sort of bit worse place, but at a cheaper price. But that I never came across this question because I never paid attention to this. I was always focusing on, okay, this is there, so now we'll increase just by 5% or even 10% is fine, or just by 2%, I cannot increase more than that. So we are just focused on the incremental increase. The initial decision may be inefficient, and on top of that you are keeping on increasing, so that inefficiency is going on. You need to ensure that such kind of inefficiency, and this is, we are talking about just one simple case. Now there is the entire economy on which you have allocated things. So every year if you simply keep on increasing percentage allocation or keep on decreasing percentage allocation, it may not work. So you need to rethink, reevaluate. So reevaluation would have been what? Okay, forget that I am spending this. How much I should spend? What do I want to do with my salary? How much savings I want to do? So how much should I spend? Should I spend less? Let's say less than 20k, right? Then in that case I need to start searching, right? So what do you do is you take everything equal to 0 and you replan from scratch. So as someone said, you replan from scratch. Replanning is done from scratch. Okay. So write down under zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting. All departments are to be reviewed afresh. All departments under zero-based budgeting, all departments are to be reviewed afresh from base 0. Are to be reviewed afresh from base 0. From base 0. Instead of merely from the incremental changes proposed. Instead of merely from incremental changes proposed. Instead of merely from the incremental changes proposed. Clear? So any program which will be there, any scheme which will be there, it has to justify itself every year, right? That is a good way. It would become a big task because you have to do over and over again, but it would increase the efficiency. Next, write down gender-based budgeting. Now, what is gender-based budgeting? Anyone from this side who has not answered so far? Yes? No. What is gender-based budgeting? Chalo, if you are not understanding, you understand English. So, based on English, can you tell me what gender-based budgeting should be? Zero-based budgeting was based on zero. Gender-based budgeting would be based on gender. So now can someone explain what is gender-based budgeting? How can you give preference to both? Preference is when you give more importance to one over the other. But you are saying, oh sorry? Equality. So you are saying that we will allocate resources equally. Extra importance. So you mean to say extra money will be allocated for female?
Extra money.
Then?
For example, if you are allocating 100 rupees,
Huh.
if already the male-based gender development in India is higher, so we will allot only 40 rupees for them and 60 rupees.
So that's what I said. We will allocate more for females.
It is just the.
Oh, wait, no, I'm talking to her. Will you allocate more to females? You're saying yes. Why I am asking you to think on this is because prelims based questions can be that only. In gender-based budgeting, when more allocation is there for females than males, it is gender-based budgeting. When the allocation for females and males are equal, that is gender-based budgeting. So 1 is correct, 2 is correct, both are correct, none are correct. Simply I formed a question for prelims, right? So please understand, how can we talk about more allocation to one gender? Why I am saying this is because when you talk about labor force participation, the labor force participation of males are way high, right? So allocating less money specifically for male and more money specifically for female is not going to work. Ultimately, we want all the genders on the same footing, same platform. That is the idea. But you cannot directly do that. Can you directly make Manrega scheme as, let's say, there is percentage of reservation that is 33%. But can you suddenly make it 50%? The approach is to go there. Now also when we are talking about reservation of seats in parliament, it is coming to 1/3. Ultimately, we would want ideally, approaching that, right? But all of a sudden we didn't come up with 50%. Right, in the same manner here also, if let's say I was giving a 45 lakh crore is there. So you cannot have 22.5 lakh crore for females and 22.5 lakh crore for males. This is not how it's going to work. So it's not about giving them equally. It's not about giving them more also. So what is it then? Increase? We're talking about budget. So what we'll do? Very good. You are saying something? No, you are also saying something.
Keeping the leaves on both the genders.
Keeping?
While making the budgeting, they consider leaves on both genders.
Okay. So yeah, that point is correct. So why is there a need for gender-based budgeting? Do you guys think that there is even a need for gender-based budgeting or not? There is a need. We all know that. We are on the same page on that. So in this, why is there a need then? The gender disparity is there. So we need gender budgeting. But what are the disparities? Okay, so the entire we will talk about, you might have studied Human Development Index. It calculates for males as well as females. For females, it is lower. So when you talk about Human Development Index, how much is it for India? Something around 0.42 or 0.408, something like that, around 0.42. Okay, that is for India. Now, so when you talk about Human Development Index, the Human Development Index for females is lesser than the Human Development Index for males. Right? This disparity is there. Now, human development would take into account the socio-economic factors. So basically you are saying, even when you talk about socio-economic development, it's lesser for females and it is more for males. 0.6, okay. And for when we calculate this, we calculate separately for females and separately for males. So in that, for females is less than males. So because it is less, there is disparity, there is a gap. We need to address this gap. So how do we address this gap? In certain segments, what we will do is, specific female related expenditures. So there can be schemes which are specific for females. right? So number one, there can be schemes which are specific for females. That can be one thing. Second thing can be whenever you are allocating anything, if you allocate, let's say, Employment Guarantee Act, right? You may find 90% males are taking the employment and very less female are taking it. That is why you need to come up with a reservation or a limit at, up to which there has to be female. So whenever there is 30% or more women reservation or allocation, that scheme would be women centric. Women centric. So one is only for females, only for female scheme, 100% is going to them. The other is women centric. So women centric does not mean more than 50%. If there is 30% or more reservation or allocation of funds specifically for female participants, that is a women centric scheme. Clear? Okay. Women centric, there is one more name for this, is pro women. So if you are 30% in favor of women, you are pro women, right? Now, why we are like saying it in a lighter vein, but why this is because presently the participation is even lower, right? That is why this is the first step. Once we reach that, probably we'll have a next step which is higher than this. Okay? Clear? Gender-based budgeting is clear? Now, India follows all these different kinds of budgeting that we have discussed. Gender-based budgeting are also there. Certain schemes are brought in only for females. Reservations or allocation of 30% funds are there. In Manrega scheme it is there. I think a Startup India scheme it is there, right? And specific schemes for female is also there, right? So we follow that. We follow outcome-based budgeting also. We follow performance-based budgeting also. Different ministries does that, right? Clear? Any questions?
Sir, can we see the developments happen for the women-based?
We'll see that. We'll see that when we'll come on to the part of this this year's budget. Now we are discussing the budget and its concepts specifically. In the next session, we'll be taking it what specific things have been done, okay, with respect to the Gyan which I talked about, Garibi, Yuva, Annadata, that's farmer, and women, Nari Shakti, alright. Now let's write down other related terms which you should know. Some would be very simple, but you should know. If you don't know it, it will be difficult for you to answer. The first concept, related terms or concepts. The first concept is crowding out effect. What is crowding out effect?
When the government starts taking loans, everyone is willing to give it to the government itself, because of which for the private sector the loans to be given becomes
very good. So, if you are taking an example for, let's say, loans, people want loans. So, for example, the government want loans, the private sector want loans, right? Now, this is the loan pool. This is the total amount of money in the economy which can be distributed for loans, right? Let's say it's 100. Now, if government enters it and takes only 10, then the private sector has 90 left for it to take, right? But the government itself is not having money and probably wants more money as loans from the market, right? So, let's say it wants 80 of it. So, what will be left for the private sector? Only 20. So, what is happening? Since the government is taking so much, it is getting crowded. it is getting crowded and the private sector is facing the crowding out effect because of such a huge presence of the government. Clear? Now you said people would be more inclined to give loans to the government. Why? Assurance. Assurance is the key. You have government securities, right? Government securities. It is the safest in the world, unless of course your government is of let's say South Sudan or even Pakistan, yes, right? Even I would say China, they are authoritative. If they don't want to give, they won't give, even if the international organization asks you to give. So of course, but if the government is the government of India, then yes, it is the most secured form of loan you can give. These government securities are also known as gilt-edged securities. Gilt-edged securities. Why they are called as gilt-edged securities? A question for prelims. Why they are called gilt-edged securities? Are you guys giving tests? How many tests have you given so far? Total, including sectional test, everything. My question, that's still not the answer. For mains, you should focus what the question is and then address that question. 26, it's a good amount. Good. Fair enough. Anyhow, that's not related to this. Please. What is gilt-edged securities? What do you mean by gilt? It's not G-U-I-L-T. It's gilt, related to glittering, related to gold. Okay. Now, why I'm specifically mentioning it? Because it's related to that. You may think because the government bonds are the safest, securities are the safest. That could be the reason. But the reason is, when you talk about government securities, it is nothing but a piece of paper. Right? This is your government security. You get a piece of paper, you give money to the government. When you then later on, after that certain time, you return the paper, you get the money. Now, when these securities were printed, they had gilt edges. It had golden gilt edges to it. And since then, its name is gilt-edged securities. Of course, coincidentally, they are also one of the safest form of investment. Okay? So, I hope we are clear on the crowding out effect. Right? Write down next. Next is fiscal consolidation. We saw fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit, we understood the meaning of fiscal deficit. So, what will be fiscal consolidation? Is the government wanting to do fiscal consolidation or not? So, what is fiscal consolidation?
It is actually one of the measures which is taken to reduce the fiscal deficit. I mean, like the government is spending too much of money, so when it is undertaking the fiscal consolidation, it will be
simply trying to reduce your fiscal deficit. You can take many measures for that. So, fiscal consolidation is nothing but your write down effort to reduce fiscal deficit. Now, what are the methods the government is using for fiscal consolidation? One method which was very famous or infamous, you may say, is disinvestment. But it was criticized because it is said that disinvestment should not be done only for the sake of fiscal consolidation. It should be done after proper analysis. Disinvestment as in PSUs owned by the government, so they sell a part of it, a minor part of it, minor stake, a major stake, or the entire of it, right? So you should not just simply sell it because there is a huge fiscal deficit and you want to close it. Your disinvestment should be based on a very logical and researched reasons. Is it doing well or not? If it is not doing well, have we taken any steps to address that? If we have not, then let's try to take certain steps ourselves first. If we have tried it, even then it is failing and we are not having the capabilities to address it, okay, fine, now we can sort of probably disinvest it, right? So that is very much important, right? Fiscal consolidation. Next, write down, fiscal neutrality is a very simple concept. So whenever the budget or government is taking any actions, the government takes the action with respect to, let's say, either increase inflation, reduce inflation, either to consolidate the fiscal deficit, fiscal consolidation. But if there is a decision taken without considering increase or decrease in fiscal deficit, that decision would be fiscally neutral. So that would be fiscal neutrality. Fiscal neutrality, write down, decisions taken irrespective of the fiscal deficit. Decisions taken irrespective of its effect on fiscal deficit. Any decision taken irrespective of its effect on fiscal deficit. Right? That is fiscal neutrality. Write down next. This comes from fluid mechanics actually, but it works in economy also. Write down next. Any engineers here? One, just 4, 5, 6. Okay. Pump priming. Have you ever heard the concept of pump priming? Okay, I'll give you another example. Have anyone tried to, take out petrol from one vehicle and transfer it to another with a pipe? Yes. Right? So what do? Suck it a bit so that the pressure is created. Once it starts coming out, it comes out on its own. But initially you have to give the push. So that initial push which you give is your pump priming. Generally this is done in pumps also, because when you are taking out petrol with a pipe from one vehicle and into a bottle, you have sort of, when you are sucking it out, it's sort of a pump you are creating. Pump, what does pump create? Pressure. So you are sucking it out, you are creating more pressure there, right? That's how it will flow. So generally in pumps it is done. If you have a pump at the ground floor to pull out, take water at the top level, right? So initially it may take time. So what do is you first, let's say, force a lot of water on your own initially. Once it starts, then you don't have to do anything. So that initial push that you give is your pump priming. Now the same thing is done in the economy, especially when there is slow growth rate. Slow growth rate, or let's say there can be decelerating growth rate. So when there is slow growth rate, what is happening? People do not have money as such to invest. There are not much investments which are happening. No investment, no supply. When no investments are there, then jobs will also not be there. When jobs are not there, you do not get money. When you are not getting money, you again don't have money to buy. So again supply will also, demand will also go down, and again lesser number of people would want to invest. So this vicious cycle will keep continuing. The slow growth will keep on being slower, right? So to come out of this slow growth rate, what the government will do? The government itself will infuse liquidity, for example. It will provide subsidies, it will provide tax cuts for you to spend more, for people to start investments, for people to start industries, right? So infuse liquidity. What they are doing? Pump priming. Initial liquidity provided by the government. And once it starts, once there are few factories and all coming up, that means job has come up. That means now more people will have money. That means they will demand more. That means more people would now want to start businesses. Clear? So you have reversed the cycle by pump priming. Understood this concept? Yes. Now, one of the way to do pump priming is, as I said, infusing liquidity. Now, infusing liquidity is nothing but our second concept, that is economic stimulus. Economic stimulus can be directly in the form of liquidity. It can be in the form of tax cuts also. You are reducing the tax, you are letting people have, or the organizations have, more money with them, right? Or directly infusing money in the sector. Can you remember any sector in the last 5 to 10 years where the government has infused a lot of liquidity? Manufacturing is a very big broad concept. Sorry? That's a good answer. Have you heard of discoms? Right? Distribution companies, they distribute electricity. There was a scheme which is called as Uday scheme. Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana. Right? There the government has promised to infuse a lot of liquidity.
Why specifically over here, sir? Any reason?
Yes, because, yes, saying something? See, discoms were in losses. Discoms, the distribution companies, not the electricity, not manufacturing, but distributing it. So they were in losses. At the same time, the government wants, electricity everywhere. So, let's say, where there is not existing, right, you want electricity there. Now discoms are already facing issues. So they would not be inclined to provide their, let's say, distribution over there also. That would be costly, and whatever revenue they will generate would be less. At the same time, they are already in debts, already making losses, as a result of which the government promised to infuse liquidity in discoms to the tune of lakhs of crores of rupees. Okay, for that they had brought in Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana. One step was to provide liquidity. Second step was better management, managing better. Third, if you would see now, there are private players also involved. What are the name of private players who are involved as discoms now? What else? So basically now, private players are also involved. In your bills, you will see sometimes, my bill in Mumbai used to come from Tata Power. Right, here what is it? Acha, it's the government one. Like in Maharashtra, there will be Maharashtra Nirvaran. So the Maharashtra government is also there. So I mean to say the PSU is also there. In, let's say, Maharashtra, PSUs are also there, Tata Power is also there. So you will have a mix of it, the discoms, right? Is this clear? Clear? Any questions? Right. Now write down the next. Incentivization is also there. Subsidies, tax cuts. Basically, you want people to have more money. There are various ways to give people money. Reduce the taxes, provide the subsidy, direct cash transfers. The same thing works for citizens. It also works for organizations as well.
Economic stimulus, can it include infrastructure building?
Economic stimulus, yes, it can include. It will not include direct liquidity infusion, it is not, but economic stimulus is there. Yes. So economic stimulus is a broader concept, under which one way is to directly give the cash, that is liquidity transfer. Okay. Now a very important concept which will help you in your personal budgeting also, when if some of you are already earning, you can understand this. If you are not, later on when you will earn, know about this concept. What is fiscal drag?
Expenditures increase, but not.
When the income increases, the tax also
Yes. Yes. So what happens is, let's say your income was 9.9 lakhs. So not a single penny is under the tax slab of 30%. Right? Now you get an increment. Now it's, let's say, 12 lakhs, right? So now when you have 12 lakhs, the 2 lakhs over and above 10 lakh is under 30% tax bracket. 30% tax bracket, as in if you do not have any investment or any expenditure to show, 60,000 is gone. Right? 60,000 is gone. Now you thought your salary has increased, but what has happened? No, you are paying a lot. So the sudden increase in the tax liabilities due to the increase in the salary, it will put a strain on you, and that strain, it has nothing to do as such directly with that fiscal deficit and all we talked about. That drag, that strain is your fiscal drag.
Is it not 30% of 2.1 lakh?
No, it has nothing to do with how much you are getting. It is, the slab is above 10 lakhs. There are slabs.
Yeah, but I think it's about 10 lakhs, 2.1 is extra, right? On that it is
Above 10 lakhs, only 2 lakh is extra, na?
okay, 2 lakhs. For 2 lakhs it's 30%, I'm asking.
Ha, for 2 lakhs, not 2.1 lakhs. You are getting confused.
Yeah, I got it. I'm saying for 2 lakhs it's 30%.
Yeah, it is for 2 lakhs and it is not for 2.1 as you were suggesting.
It's for 2 lakhs and not for 12 lakhs is my point.
Not for 12 lakhs, of course not. There are slabs. It is not for 2.1 because it's not on the difference. It is over and above 10%. And also it is not for 12 lakhs. It is for over and above 10 lakh, it is 30%. Below it, whatever the slab rates are there, for each slab you get different taxation. For example, up to 2.5 lakhs, there is 0%. From 2.5 to next, it will be, so whatever slabs are there, based on that slab, you will get the percentage. Clear? Now we understood one concept of monetization of monetized deficit, right? Monetization of deficit. So in monetized deficit, what was happening? The government was taking money from the RBI. So how do they take money from the RBI? Ways and means methods. So write that down. Ways and means advances. Ways and means advances. Now whenever, if the government is short on cash and they want for a short, generally it is for short terms. For short term cash requirement. For short term cash requirement, the government can have ways and means advances from the RBI. Instead of borrowing from somewhere else, paying high amount of tax rates, you take it from here. And in short term, the tax rates are actually higher. Have you noticed that? For short term loans, for short term borrowings, the percentage of interest is higher. For long term, it is lesser. Generally in long term, you have house loan kind of things which you have collaterals for. Why is the interest rate less in home loans? And interest rate in home loans is less than interest rate in personal loans. Why? Yes. This is a collateral loan. So when you take home loan, the papers, if you bought it from someone, the paper is now in your name, but those papers are kept with the bank. So if you don't pay, they have your property anyhow. That is why the amount of loans getting paid will be higher in home loans, because you have your collateral, you want to get it back. Here you do not have collateral. You are taking loans for your marriage, you are taking loans for certain personal expenses, right? So personal loan, now they will again check your salary slip, all those things will be there, but as such any collateral is not there with them, right? Salary slip only tells you in the past 6 months you have earned. Later you earn, you don't earn, or even if you earn, whether you give or not, that's a different thing altogether. So that is why if home loans are, let's say, 8.9% here, this personal loan may go up to 16% because there is a risk for the bank over here. Is this clear? Any doubts in whatever we have studied so far? Okay, so let's very quickly let's start from here. What is primary deficit? No, without looking at it, guys. I'll come to you. Yes. Yes. What is let's say budget deficit?
Expenditure minus total.
Zero based budgeting.
We start the refresh.
Yes. Very good. What is gender based budgeting?
Based on the gender,
What are the two components of it? How do we do it? 100% female specific schemes or any other scheme in which at least 30% reservation is there, right? Performance budgeting? What? Explain. You will say outcome budgeting based on outcome, performance budgeting based on performance. How? Okay, you use that indicators. Outcome budgeting? End goals. What are the steps involved in that? Steps involved in outcome budgeting without looking in the register? Without looking in the register. What is outcome budgeting? Steps? Yeah, steps. Okay, you have looked at it anyhow. Yes. Outcome budgeting steps.
We have to see the interventions.
Let others also listen.
We have to decide the outcome.
Yes.
We have to check for the intervention.
Yes.
And last one, I don't know.
Allocate fund. Last one is the most important. Right? Last one is the most important. Who brings out the budget? We forgot this. Who brings out the budget? As in which department, ministry, not presented. We saw president calls for the budget, finance minister presents it. Who brings out the budget? Ministry of? So there is a budget division. Budget division under Department of Economic Affairs, which is under Ministry of Darkness. You know darkness, Ministry of Darkness, anyone knows? Anyone knows Ministry of Darkness? Ministry of Finance. Ministry of Darkness is related to WWF, World Wrestling Federation, which is now World Wrestling Entertainment. Anyhow, so no WWE fans over here. Yeah, Ministry of Darkness. Exactly. Yeah, Undertaker everyone knows, right? Brothers of Destruction. Okay. So Ministry of Finance, not Ministry of Darkness, Ministry of Finance. Okay. Now, is the railway budget separate or not? How many are saying that it is not separate? Okay. How many are saying it is separate? Lift your hand. You have to lift it now. Huh? Achha, you are leaving this answer. Anyone who says it's separate? Not separate, right? You are getting confused. 12 minus 9.9 is 2.1. And then you are saying, no, sir, I am not talking about 2.1. All these things are getting recorded. Anyhow, let's understand this. In 1924, or why to go to 1924? Let's first understand the concept. Earlier, the railway, initially when budgeting started, under the colonial rule, budget used to be there. Okay, so in 1860 is when the first budget actually happened for British India. That time they called us British India, right? So why 1860? Because in 1858 what had happened? The transfer of power from British East India Company, yes, British East India Company to the British Crown, right? So the transfer of power happened, and you can very clearly see now they are not just economic benefits, it's a completely governance that is happening. From economics they have converted into governance. Now, since 1858 this happened, then all the process of government like processes you would see. So 1860 the budget was presented. When the budget was presented, there was no such distinguishment between railway budget and general budget, it was the same. But later on, they separated the Britishers. Who? The Britishers. We are still under the British rule at that time. So Britishers separated the railway budget. Now what could be the reason for this? Railways for transport we all know, but what would be the reason? Railways for transport now also. But industrials are a better situation now than then. Who said that? Yes, exactly. So why would you separate? Because this railway itself is constituting a huge amount. Since railway itself is constituting a huge amount, you deal it with separately. You separate it out. So in 1924, the British, that the railways and all was at its zenith, doing earning a lot or a lot of money involved. So you separate this budget. Now there was a colonial hangover, right? So separate budget would be there, but now we have merged it. Also because now the railway part would not be that much. Service sector has come in, which constitutes such a huge amount. So railway budget related to railway has become very small. So we have anyhow merged it now. Earlier when the budget used to come? End. Now when it comes? 1st of February. Why that change? More time we should get. We saw detailed discussion also it's to be required. So that is a very good decision to have it at that time, at 1st of February. Alright, so any questions guys? No questions? So in next part, we will look at, now we will start with 2024 and 25 budget, in which we will look at part A, which will deal with the macroeconomics part. Part A would deal with the macroeconomics. It would deal with the vision, or you can say the focus area. Where is the government having more emphasis, so on and so forth. Part B would deal with the taxes, revenues, basically overall, and what has been the trend kind of question. One trend based question was asked in the last 10 years, was this continuously happening or not? So it's very difficult for something to continuously improve. But if I give a question in the last 10 years, the GDP has increased consistently. Why no? Yes. Right. If this question is asked in 2015, then what would be the answer? It did actually. Yeah, it could be. That's intelligent way to answer it. It could be, it did. If I say the growth rate of GDP consistently increased in the last 10 years, never. You can take any 10 years after independence, 47 to 57, 48 to 58, okay, 49 to 59. Never it has happened that for consistently 10 years, there was a consistent increase in the growth rate. Why? Because for growth rate to consistently increase, it's very difficult. GDP will keep increasing, but growth rate to increase, you are saying if the economy is growing by 8%, next year it should grow by an amount greater than 8%. Let's say 8%, then 9, then 10, then 11, and there not be any dip. Even after 11 it becomes 10.5, that is not acceptable. Right? So keep continuous growth rate also increasing is very difficult. Okay, so we'll see those kind of trends etc. over here. We'll see what focus the government has and what all it plans to do and what all impact will it have when it does that, and we will look at certain trends which can be asked in your exams. Is this absolutely clear? All right, any questions? No questions? All right, so let's meet in the next session. Thank you. Mention not, guys.